Anyone who says that capitalism is failing is either lying or being misled. Capitalism works. Crony capitalism doesn't. And that's what we have going on right now in America. Crony capitalism. Actually, I think we're actually into crony socialism now. It is rampant in Washington, and politicians on both sides of the aisle are guilty of it. This is why the politicians go corrupt so rapidly. These guys come into office as members of the middle class. They're just like you. But when they leave, they are multimillionaires. Now, how exactly does that work? How many years on my program have we asked, how did John Conyers make so much money? How did Charlie Rangel, who's a middle-class working guy who went and he was a war hero, how has he all of a sudden got houses everywhere as a public servant? It's called insider trading, and in D.C. it is legal. Tonight, I want to spend a few minutes talking to you, showing you how insane the insider trading is. And when people say, well, why would they want to do that? Why would somebody want to collapse the system? Why would they? Because they're building the infrastructure. They have a playground that you don't have. And wait until you see how George Soros has made his money in the last 18 months. Peter Schweizer is the William J. Casey Research Fellow at the Hoover Institution. He is the author of Throw Them All Out. If you haven't read this book, you need to read this book. It is, it's amazing. I warn you, not good for your blood pressure. But it will show you that this is not a Democratic problem. It is on both sides. How you doing?
Good to see you.
Good to see you, Peter. Okay, so where do you want to start? You want to start with all of them, or you want to start with Soros?
It's up to you. We could maybe start with a couple of historic events that kind of put everything to relief and give it a timeline.
Go for it.
All right. Let's start with the 2008 financial crisis, if we could. And we'll try to visualize it here to make a little bit more sense of it. Going back in time to the financial crisis, people will recall that in mid-September there were concerns about where things might be going. Well, on Capitol Hill, there was a briefing put together by Hank Paulson, the Treasury Secretary, and Ben Bernanke, who was the Fed Chairman. Now, they had a series of briefings and meetings with congressional leaders. These were closed-door briefings to show you how secretive they were. You had to leave your BlackBerry and you had to leave your cell phone at the door because it was that sensitive.
This is when? Right
this
before
is September of 2008.
Before TARP.
That's right, before TARP. Now, the Dow Jones Industrial Average is still over 11,000, so people are a little bit nervous, but panic has not set in yet.
Got it.
And on the night of September the 18th, they hold this briefing at 7 o'clock at night. Members of Congress are there. Let me just give you an example of what happens. At this meeting, according to Paulson's memoir, they describe to the congressman that we are facing financial calamity. They tell them that the stock market's going to go down at least 20%. They explain that we could be facing a worldwide financial crisis and that we need to take action pretty strong and pretty soon. Pretty dramatic statements. According to Paulson, the members of Congress that were there were ashen-faced and stunned at what they were hearing. Well, the next morning, one of those people who was at that meeting is Spencer Baucus. He's a Republican from Alabama, the ranking Republican then, now the chairman of the House Financial Services Committee. He takes that information and the next morning shorts the market. Now, for those who don't look at options trading or don't understand it, what shorting means is you're betting or knowing that the market's going to go down.
That's crazy that's allowed to happen.
Yes, and he does it the next day. He buys something called ProShares Ultra Short.
Keep going.
Which is a leveraged options trade. So he literally is betting that that the market is going to go down, and he makes $10,000 off of that one transaction just that one day. Now, Spencer Baucus is not alone. He's not the only one who's at that meeting. And there are 10 people at that meeting
who end
up...
the whole stack. I'll get the whole stack. You keep going.
All right.
I'll hold the stack.
There are 10 members of Congress and Senate who are at those meetings, and a lot of those end up selling a lot of their shares based on this private briefing they got. Dick Durbin, who is on the subcommittee for financial services in the Senate and the second-ranking Senate Democrat, he decides, based on this information, to sell his holdings to avoid losses, and he does. He sells more than $70,000 worth of his investments, which for Dick Durbin is a lot of money.
Okay, so hang on, just so you know, you haven't been allowed, you don't know. You don't know. They're still playing a game with you. You don't know this is coming because you'll freak out. So you are going to receive the losses. They're pulling their money out, or even worse, they're betting against the market. We have to figure it out. I have to tell you. This is what I think is coming. They know. Okay.
That's a great point, Glenn, because right now, while they're doing this, the Dow is over 11,000. In a month, it's going to be down to 8,000.
My gosh.
And a lot of these guys have gotten out of the market or shorted the market, and they're actually making money on this calamity. Now, here's what's interesting about what Durbin does. He takes and sells his shares in stock, and then a few days later, he buys shares in Berkshire Hathaway. Berkshire Hathaway is the investment fund that is run by Warren Buffett. This is an interesting purchase because he buys this on September the 21st. The next day, on September the 22nd, it's publicly announced that Berkshire Hathaway is buying a big stake in Goldman Sachs. And, of course, Goldman Sachs gets a...
Who did this?
This is Dick Durbin. Dick Durbin sells all his shares, and then on September the 21st buys Berkshire Hathaway stock, and then the next day Goldman Sachs is purchased in part.
Any doubt in your mind that... No.
None whatsoever. And they get a 10% dividend. So he's made a great timed bet getting out of the market and then making the right decision and buying Berkshire Hathaway.
Who would ever want to lose this job?
You wouldn't want to.
You would never want to lose this
That's
job because
right.
it's all legal.
That's exactly right.
Right. And this is why they stay in there and they never get out because and then nobody ever stands against it because everybody else, they know I'm never going to change the law.
That's right.
I'm never going to get these guys to vote against any of this crap.
Yeah.
And everybody else is doing it. Who has the character? Can you name, is there one person that has the character that you have seen that is not playing this game?
There are some members of Congress that, out of principle, don't trade stock. Michelle Bachmann does not trade stock, for example. Ron Paul is not an active or aggressive stock trader. There are people in both parties that don't do it.
Good.
But there's nothing illegal in doing this.
I know.
And here's what's frightening. There was a study done, Glenn, where they looked at 6,000 stock trades by senators. And what they found is the average corporate insider beats the market by 5% a year. That's pretty good.
So in other words, somebody who's in the know in the stock market
Exactly.
business.
They beat the market by 5%. Hedge funds, guys like Soros, the guys that make big bucks, they beat the market by 7 to 8% a year. United States senators beat the market by 12% a year. So either they're a lot more brilliant than we ever give them credit for,
and we know that's not true. They're dumb as a box of rocks.
So there's something fishy going on. Now, they weren't the only ones that did it. We had a gentleman named John Kerry, and his wife, of course, are very wealthy, also make some interesting well-timed trades. After the market drops, they buy shares in Citigroup in October. What's interesting about this is they buy them literally a couple of days before it's publicly announced that Citigroup is going to get $50 billion worth of bailout money. You can imagine what the stock of Citigroup did on that knowledge. And there were numerous other financial transactions.
So when he bought it, it's all on the way down because everybody's like, I don't know what's going to survive. No, everybody's getting out of, what was Citigroup at a share?
It was, at that point, I believe, down at about $8 a share.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
When he bought it, it was 8. What did it go back up to?
It doubled. It doubled after the Citigroup bailout.
How's your 401k? Did you double your money? Did you double? Because he doubled his money.
And there's the same thing with Bank of America. He did the same thing with Bank of America. So these are people that are designing the bailout, getting access to inside information, and they're buying into the banks that they are designing the bailout for.
It's legalized bribery.
Yes. The example would be, Glenn, is if we allowed professional athletes to bet on games in which they played. We never let them do that. But this is far worse than that, and it goes on all the time. Claire McCaskill does the same thing. She joins Senator Durbin in buying Berkshire Hathaway stock at a very well-timed case. So this just gives you a nutshell of what happened in 2008 during the financial crisis.
How much time do we have here, Tiffany? Could we do the Obamacare and the other, or should we go to Soros? How much time do we have? And then we come back at the other end of the break? Okay. So we have 3 minutes here. So and then we come back to the break and we have some more time.
Okay.
So should we go to
Obamacare
now? Let's go
yes.
Obamacare now.
Yes.
And let me get the,
okay.
You start on Obamacare. And
okay.
Matt, will you turn that here? Okay.
So Obamacare in 2009, this is another historic event. In this case, we have big government involvement in the healthcare business. Let's focus first of all on Gerald Paulus, who's a Democrat from Colorado, very wealthy. He is a big supporter of Obama's health care plan. He does something that I think is pretty cynical. He is supporting it. He's on the Powerful Rules Committee, and he's on the Committee on Education and Labor, where this bill passes through. As that bill passes through his committee, he buys between $7 and $35 million into a company called Bridge Health International. What is Bridge Health International? This is what's called a medical tourism company. And by that, we mean this is a company that if you want to get a surgery done in Costa Rica...
You've got to be kidding
No.
me.
And they were all perceived as big winners in Obamacare. The medical tourism industry loved Obamacare. So talk about a cynical play. He's pushing the Obamacare legislation.
That will drive Americans out of this country to go get better health care elsewhere.
And he's ready to profit at it. He's ready to profit at it. Another gentleman, I brought up the name before, but this would be John Kerry. John Kerry is actively and aggressively buying and selling health care stocks during the 2009 Obamacare legislation, and he literally ends up netting millions of dollars in capital gains. So he's writing legislation, pushing it, and making sure that he profits from it. Senator Carper, who sits on the same committee, he was, according to Tom Daschle in the Obama White House, the point man of Obamacare. He's trading health care stocks at the same time he's pushing it through the United States Senate. And then we have John Boehner, who is now Speaker of the House. At the time, he was leading the opposition to Obamacare. He was opposed to the public option, which in my mind was the right position to take.
Yep.
The problem is 3 days before it was publicly announced that the public option was dead, he bought stock in 5 different health insurance companies. And of course, these companies wanted to see Obamacare die, and their stock prices went up when the news became public. So you literally see these individuals doing this. There's nothing illegal with it, and there's nothing unethical about it, at least by the standards of the Senate and House
There
ethics
are no
committees.
standards in the Senate and
There
House.
There aren't. In the Senate Ethics Manual, there are 6 paragraphs on the improper use of Senate stationery. There's not one mention of insider trading.
Will any of the candidates lead a charge against this?
Well, some of the presidential candidates have talked about it. Rick Perry has talked about it and condemned it.
He actually had a great spot on it. I think he believes that. Do you think he believes that?
I think he does.
Okay, who else?
That's been about it.
Wow.
Yeah, that's been about it. Now, people condemn it, but in terms of really taking action and holding these people accountable.
Any of this stuff changes?
No, I don't think so, unless the American people continue to rise up and demonstrate their anger. There's something called the Stock Act that would make insider trading illegal among congressmen. It had 6 co-sponsors before my book came out. It now has 147. So, and that's really because the anger of the American people in hearing about this. But there are problems with the Stock Act, namely that I don't think it will be enforced by the Securities and Exchange Commission because they're too scared of Congress. But there are...
This is crazy.
There are responses that we can take.
How can we fix our country with this going on?
We can't.
We can't.
We can't. And you know, Glenn, if we can't fix this...
You can't fix anything.
How can we fix anything?
You can't fix Social Security. You can't fix it. Because this requires honorable men and women.
Right.
This requires people to say, you know what, this isn't right.
Yes.
I know everybody else is doing it, but this isn't right.
Yes, that's exactly right.
That takes moral fortitude or intestinal fortitude of Washington or Lincoln proportion, and these guys aren't capable of this.
Yeah, you know, Thomas Jefferson said in 1807 when he left public life, I have the honor of leaving with my hands as clean as empty as when I entered. I'm not sure there are many people in Washington that can say that today.
No, okay.
Unfortunately not.
When we come back, I want to take you to George Soros, because this is all legal.
Yeah.
What George Soros is doing, I cannot believe, is legal. He's not under the protection of Congress.
Right.
Would you agree with me?
I would agree with you on that, but I think it's legal because of the way that the government allows that to happen. I think it needs to change.
America, if you haven't read this book, when you see this, what George Soros has done, everybody has said, why would George, he's a capitalist, why would, no, he's not. No, he's not. He is, You watch next.
Still on camera one.
Back with Peter Schweizer. You have, Peter, done more to clean up the corruption in Washington, I think, in the last 90 days than most people do in a lifetime.
Well, I think it's the American people that have been very upset about it. I'm the messenger providing the information.
I understand that. But you are, you have made a huge, huge impact. Full disclosure, Peter also helped write Broke, wasn't it?
Yes, that's right.
You were one of the researchers and writers on Broke. Okay. The name of the book is Throw Them All Out. It is a great book. I want to get to this George Soros thing here in a second, but I want to do two more because this land deal thing that I read about is, I warn you, your head is going to, as I said on Friday, you'll have eye cramps. Watch this one.
Well, there's another legal way that you can get rich, what I call legal graft, and that's the land deal. Again, this is legal. It's not deemed unethical by the standards of Congress. To give you one example, this is Dennis Hastert, Speaker of the House.
And he seems like a good guy. I mean, the public goes like, you know, he's a good guy.
Yeah, a wrestling coach who ran for Congress, became Speaker of the House. Well, in 2004, he bought, in a series of transactions, 333 acres of land out in the middle of nowhere in Illinois. 4 months after that, as Speaker of the House, he puts in an earmark into the federal transportation budget to create the Prairie Parkway, which sounds nice. The trouble is that this Prairie Parkway runs right by the 333 acres that he had accumulated. And the land that was out in the middle of nowhere is now no longer going to be out in the middle of nowhere. And he's able to sell it for twice what he paid for
Can you
it
imagine?
in less than a year.
I mean, you would, if somebody would have paid, if I would have purchased the land in the middle of nowhere, then I went to my congressman and I said, look, I'm going to give you half of what I can sell this land for. You just put this in. We'd go to jail, would we not?
Yes, that's bribery.
We'd go to jail.
Yes.
He does it himself, and it's perfectly legal.
That's right. And by the standards of Congress, all they have to prove on earmarks is that at least one other person benefits besides themselves, and it's okay for them to profit and see their value go up through earmarks. It's just outrageous. They're using our taxpayer money to enrich themselves.
Okay, the IPO and
IPOs. Another way they get rich is initial public offerings of stock. And the example here would be Nancy Pelosi. If you go into a congressman's office and offer them $10,000 in a shoebox, it's bribery. You're going to jail. But if you go into a congressman's office and say, look, I need a favor, but I'm going to give you 5,000 shares of stock, you're going to get to buy it at $44 a share. The next day, it's going to sell for $66 a share and then be worth $90 a share. In other words, you're making $100,000 or more in one day. That's completely legal. And so IPOs, initial public offerings of stock, happened. That's what happened to Nancy Pelosi in 2008.
If I were in a meeting, I was in a meeting this weekend where I heard about deals that, you know, are being made.
Yeah.
I can't, an IPO. I can't trade on that. I can't make a dime on that.
Right.
She can be in the same thing.
Yes.
She's fine.
Yes, and she received these Visa IPO shares, by the way, at a time when there was legislation that Visa was very concerned about.
Right.
When she was Speaker
It was
of the
the
House.
Financial Regulation Bill,
That's right. And she killed that for 2 years. So Visa got what it wanted for 2 years,
And she
and her
got
husband
paid for it.
And she and her husband.
This is. There's no way, Peter. There's no way. I mean, they won't leave. This is why. I mean, I've had several congressmen tell me that all of the people that came in under the Tea Party, there's far less than half of those people that still have their souls.
Yeah.
It's been 2 years.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it's been a year.
Yeah.
It's been a year.
It's incredibly seductive. There's an old saying in Washington, D.C. that when you show up, it's a cesspool. You stay long enough, it's a hot tub.
Yeah.
And that's what happens.
That is
They end
great.
up sort of swimming around.
Yeah.
So those are the land deals and the IPOs that get used.
Okay, now you want to flip this? Let's flip this because now this is where it gets good. And I urge you to share this information with your friends. And look, Peter is, as you see, Peter is taking on both sides. This is not something that just one side is doing. There's both sides. This goes back to the people who want big government. This is why Benjamin Franklin and our founders had designed Congress to be an uncomfortable place. You'd be like, don't want to serve. I don't want to serve. You would go there. You wanted to get the hell out of there. I mean, really, one of the benefits in putting it in Washington was it was built in a mosquito-infested swamp.
That's right.
And people didn't want to live there.
Yeah.
So get out. You do it quickly. You go. If you got rid of just this, people would want to go back to the private sector.
They would.
And they wouldn't put these onerous laws in place because they know they'd have to deal with what they're putting in.
That's right. They warned in the Federalist Papers that when you have a situation where Congress does not have to abide by laws as the rest of American people, that's the beginning of tyranny.
Well, there it is. Okay.
Yes. So let's talk about George Soros as an example of crony capitalism outside of government.
Now, I want you to understand, America, this is just the beginning. We're just going to take on one sector. We're going to he doubled his money or made $8 billion in 18 months. He made some extraordinary.
Yes, he's made billions of dollars over a short period of time. People often assume that George Soros is interested in politics for politics' sake.
No,
and that's destructive and not. Actually, it is a method of profit. So we're talking about George Soros, and what's interesting is when you look at the people that he often hires at his hedge funds, it's people like Malik Brown, who worked at the United Nations, did not have any background per se in finance, but was hired as a vice president of his hedge fund. And part of it is because he has good relations with government officials around. George Soros, we also know, of course, funds the Center for American Progress,
which is behind the stimulus. He's also with Tides Foundation, which has designed the stimulus, the Apollo Alliance. All of this stuff, you're saying with the UN guy, it's the same thing as Tides and Center for American Progress. He's affecting politics that will affect his wallet.
That's exactly right. And so what you have with George Soros is that in late 2008, after Obama was elected, in early 2009, as they're formulating the stimulus, Soros is neck deep involved in those discussions. He's meeting with the top economists. He's meeting with President Obama. He's meeting with White House officials on a regular basis. And he's explaining to them how to structure the bailout, what it should include, infrastructure, medical, electronic records, that sort of thing. What he's doing while he's engaging in that sort of political involvement is he's buying stock in all kinds of company. And just sort of look at what happens. One of the companies that he buys into is American Electric Power. In early 2009, before the stimulus passes, he buys 1.5 million shares. A few months later, in June of 2009, the Obama administration clears $1 billion in grants for American Electric Power project called Future Gen, which is going to be built in Illinois. That's part of the tie.
In Illinois.
Yeah, exactly. Imagine that.
Yeah.
You wonder who owns the land.
Yeah,
that's the other question.
isn't it?
Then you have Ameren, which is another energy company. He buys that in early 2009, and in June they get $540 million of our money, goes to this company for an energy project. If you look at Allegheny Energy, he buys 250,000 shares of that company, which ends up getting lots of grants. The same thing with Biofuel Energy, Constellation Energy, and Covanta. These are all companies that he buys into in early 2009 that end up getting stimulus money, loan guarantees, and grants.
Let me play, not devil's advocate, let me play the devil. I invest in a lot of things, and I had nothing to do. How would I know that any of these things were going to get bailed out, to get any kind of grants?
Well, and this is the argument people will make, that it's coincidence. Here's the interesting thing, though. When the Securities and Exchange Commission investigates insider trading, they look at, does the individual have access to information, and is there a curious pattern or timing to their trades?
Oh, just luck. I'm an old man.
By this definition, I think that it meets it very, very clearly. And you have the same thing with Entergy and Edison International and NRG Energy. These are all companies that end up getting large amounts of taxpayer money.
That just a few months earlier, he buys into.
That's exactly right. PowerSpan, for example, this company down here, he buys into it in April of 2009. On July 1st, they get $100 million of our taxpayer money for smart grid programs.
Now, let's remember, all of this stuff, right? All of this stuff, this is all the stimulus.
Yes, that's right.
And let's not forget that Tides, the Tides Foundation, gets money from him.
Right.
And that has Van Jones in the Apollo Alliance, right?
Right.
And the Apollo Alliance is the thing that does the stimulus.
Right.
And then when we rat out Van Jones, and Jones leaves, where does he go? Whoops.
Center American Progress.
Center for American Progress.
That's right.
I mean, this is so clear.
It is.
There's not a courtroom in the world that wouldn't say, at least there isn't a grand jury that wouldn't say, yeah, I think we need to see all the evidence.
That's exactly right. Let me give you a couple of more names that show the same thing. The first one is the name Kathy Zoy. She's the Assistant Secretary of Energy who approves a lot of these loans. She leaves the Department of Energy. You know where she goes? She goes and works for a new investment fund that is funded by George Soros. Let me give you another name, a gentleman named Steve Spinner. Steve Spinner is one of the individuals who is a senior advisor for green energy loans and grants at the Department of Energy. When he leaves the Department of Energy, where does he go? He becomes a senior fellow at the Center for American Progress. So you see this cycling, this revolving door of individuals who see to it that money goes to Soros-held investments, and then they turn around and work and get a paycheck from George Soros.
Could you come on the radio tomorrow and talk to me a little bit? Did you do anything on the Clintons?
There is stuff on the Clintons. There's also things on Warren Buffett. Buffett has this squeaky clean image. He is neck deep into the same thing as George Soros.
All right. Will you come on the radio tomorrow?
I would love to do that.
Okay. We'll pick that up tomorrow. The book is Throw Them All Out. This makes the case for not hiring a Washington insider and big government progressive in Washington. Trouble, gang, unless we can stop this. Back in a second.